Hey y'all. I hope you can see me. I hope this is all working well. Let me just make sure. Just let me test really quick. Really quick. Just make sure. Looks like it's working. Yay, that's so exciting. Ooh, okay. Hi. I'm gonna let people join. I know it's been a little bit crazy. I'm gonna actually just do a quick Instagram story so we can get people on board. I'm so excited to get started this morning to talk a little bit about events and event planning and hosting events. It's gonna be really fun. And we have some really fun surprise bonuses at the end, which is gonna be really cool. And I'm really excited about. So I have my trusty water. I'm gonna give people a couple minutes to start joining. Okay. Okay. All right. If you didn't know, you have to press start. If you're watching me, obviously you did know, but if you didn't know, you have to press start to watch the video on the webpage. So I'm just gonna let everyone know that in the chat. So feel free to ask questions if you have any in the chat. I'm really excited to answer them. I have a couple questions that people have already sent in because they couldn't make it live, which is totally fine. I'm super excited to host questions that way anyway. So I'm gonna get started. Let me just make sure I have my screen all set up. And then while we're waiting for people to get on board and get in, I want you to introduce yourself in the chat. Who are you? Where are you from? Just name and tell me where you're from. That would be great. Oh, let's see. So if you don't know me, I'm Lauren and I live in Montana. And I have been hosting events for years, 10 years plus, 10 plus years. I started my career a long time ago, which I'll talk a little bit about on our webinar this morning. But I just wanted to see where you guys are from and what you're hoping to learn today. So if you want to pop it in the chat is to, I think it's to the right of the video. So if you just want to pop any questions or just tell me who you are in the chat, I would love that. And then we'll get started with our content, which will be super fun. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I personally plan, launch, execute all of my events, and I'm going to give you my best tips. I also want you to know that I've definitely planned, launched, and executed events that have not worked, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. And there's definitely things that I have always been able to do when I've been hosting events that I've been able to do them better. Sometimes that has to do with the original concept of the event is like not that great, or I haven't been super passionate about it. But I will tell you the best things that I do and have done in order to make my events amazing and awesome. And it's definitely one of those things where you try a lot of stuff. And I'm going to give you my best tips so that you can hopefully try fewer things and fail less than I did. So I'm going to switch my screen over. Hopefully, if someone can just make sure that, just tell me in the chat. If you could just tell me if you can see the video, that would be great. Because I want to make sure I'm not just like broadcasting to no one. Because right now it says no viewers, and so I'm concerned because I know there's more people on the chat. So I'm hoping that there's. Just let me test. There we go. I think it is working. Okay. So hopefully this is working. If it's not working, please let me know in the chat and I'll try to figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. We're gonna get started. Super excited. Woo! Okay, so I wanna make sure that you can okay, I'm gonna minimize this so it doesn't do that crazy thing. And then if you can just oops, you don't wanna see that. There, that's what we wanna see. So if you can just tell me if you can see this in the chat, that would be great. That way I know that, um, you're all seeing it because that's really what we want. Okay, so this webinar today is I want to give you my best tips to launch, plan, and execute your next live event. Uh, oh, oh yeah, okay. My camera went off, so I was afraid that you couldn't see me, but you can see the screen. So these are my best tips. I am also going to talk to you about how I did this, all of this stuff with no list, no followers, no nothing, barely a started business, like all that fun stuff that everybody likes to talk about. But I really didn't. I really didn't have anything. I had no like special advantages. I was working kind of like a bunch of part-time freelance gigs and like trying to get my business off the ground. I think I might have had like an intro call with one client. I don't even think I had booked her. So I don't actually even think that oh no, it says it shows unavailable. Hmm. Okay. All right, it's not working. So Okay, hopefully this is working now. Let me make sure. Okay, hopefully this is working now. Let me make sure. Okay, so much tech issue. So much tech issue. Hopefully this is working now. And if it's not, we'll just have to try again. Nope, that's not right. This is definitely one of those things where it's like tech nightmare. Yay! Okay. Thanks for sticking with it, Jamie. We'll start all over. Fortunately, this is not the first time this has happened to me, but it's kind of all a part of the process. So, cool. Well, now that you can see me, I'm very excited that we can actually get started at 12 minutes late. Story of my life. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll get started. We're going to talk about how to plan events. I gave a whole intro spiel, but we're really just going to talk about how to plan, execute, and sell out. I'm going to give you my best tips. Lots of this stuff are things that I have learned from trying and failing over and over and over again. And so for me, I think it's just really important to keep testing, but also there are things that definitely do not work. I'm finding, especially now in the digital age, and there are also things that like really, really work and that really delight people and convert them a lot faster to either an attendee, potential client, things like that. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. I have learned so much about tech this morning, and thank you for sticking with me. So let's share my screen. It's going to get a little wild and crazy here for a second. I'm going to minimize this really quick so that you're not that. Okay, so here are my best tips to launch, plan, and execute your next live event. I am definitely going to also be talking about how I had no list, I had no community. I was working a bunch of part-time jobs while I was trying to start my business. My favorite saying is dreams need funding. And so I was like babysitting and doing all kinds of stuff. And then I knew that I could host events. I wanted to start hosting events. And so I got started and they were quite successful, but I also had some that weren't successful. So I wanted to make sure that I shared those stories as well. And also the best tips that I had and the takeaways that I had from every event that I've done and events that my clients have done and how I've been able to help them increase their ROI, really make sure that their process is solid start to finish and we can do better business through events. So let's get started. So in case you don't know, I'm Lauren Caselli. I run a business called Lauren Caselli Events, and I also run an event called the Boss Lady Bash. I'll probably be hosting the next one in the spring. I'm working on trying to hire someone so that I can have them more accessible to me for events. And the Boss Lady Bash is pretty templatized at this point, and so it's really just making sure that I have someone to manage it. So I have hosted, I think, 10, 11 Boss Lady Bashes in the last 3 years. But in 2015, my business was a mess. This slide says a bit of a mess. It was a mess. So I was, like I said, working maybe 3 or 4 part-time jobs, also trying to build a business. I was working part-time for, I think, another event planner at the time, and was basically just working in the summer. And lots of people tell me that my business would never work. I wanted to do corporate events. I wanted to travel for work. And lots of people said that it couldn't be done. And so in the very early parts of 2015, just about this time, maybe like February, January, I was struggling. I was a struggle show for sure. If you have been on any of my emails, that was the time where I like either paid my taxes or paid my rent. I was making hardly any money, especially in kind of this is like the dry season for weddings. And so I wasn't getting any wedding clients yet. And so I don't do weddings now, but at the time I was trying to do weddings. And so it was really tough. It was like one of those things where I didn't think I could believe in my business anymore if something didn't change. So in 2015, I invited 10 people over to my house. I asked them to, I didn't know many of them, and they didn't also know each other. I knew them kind of like ancillarily from Instagram or Facebook. And I basically just said, I would love to host you all in my living room for kind of like a coffee. And I mean, it wasn't coffee, it was late at night. So like drink wine and cheese and whatever. And I spent like maybe $30 on a bunch of cheese and crackers and a couple bottles of wine, and they all brought wine. And they were all business owners. Not many of them knew each other. And they were people that I had admired in the business space that I wanted to get to know. And I really wanted to be in community with them. So for me, it really started, my event hosting journey really started from this place of not feeling like I belonged or not really feeling like I had anything to offer. And so I wanted to be in a space with people. And so that was a big piece of it for me. I was very mission driven with it. I wanted to be really, I wanted to really create this community where I felt supported and I wanted to help support other people. So I was in such a low place that I was like, I need this in my life. So in 2015, January, they all came over. That was 3 years ago. It was so fun. I had like 2 or 3 questions that I asked them each. We had a ton of fun. And that was, I thought I was just going to do it once. And then they were like, can we do this every month? So we started a monthly kind of small group mastermindy style event. It really was just kind of like drinks and dinner, and we all hung out. And actually, we still all hang out, even though we don't really do the formalized structure anymore. But that event was the first time where I really realized that the power of being in person with someone, in the room with someone is so valuable. The power of being vulnerable with people and being able to ask them to say hard things is super valuable. And not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of people gather. Not a lot of people are the hosts. People aren't driven to do that. And so it's really, really special if you are the person or if you have clients that are the people who are driven to gather and driven to be the host of things. It really is a differentiator between a lot of people who like host events and people who like really, 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 really believe in the power of face-to-face interaction. So that's where I was at the time. I then launched an event called the Boss Lady Bash, which you're probably familiar with, maybe. It sold out in 48 hours. I'm going to walk through exactly how that happened. And it became the single greatest source of marketing and kind of influence for me in my business. I also launched like 3 other kinds of events in the same vein, and none of them were as successful or as popular as the Boss Lady Bash. So I am also going to talk a little bit about that, about why you really have to find your specific event, because it's really super important in order for you to continue running them, and B, make sure that they are super duper either profitable or lead to clients eventually. So if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat and told me that you're here, I would love for you to do that. That would be wonderful. And I also want to know what kind of event you want to host. If you're thinking about hosting an event, I'd love to know if it's like a coffee thing, if it's like a, event that you're already trying, you've already hosted and you really love. So if you could do that in the chat, I would love that, so that I can kind of have a general sense of how I can help you on this webinar. And then as you're doing that, I just want to make sure that your phone is on silent. I want to make sure that your browser tabs are closed. And I want to make sure you are ready with a notebook and a pen. You can take some notes. There are some good tips in here that I learned after many, many years. And if you have any questions at any point, feel free to pop them in the chat. I will do my best to answer them during if I can. Actually, I can't pull them up. So I'll answer them at the end. So stick around until the end, and then I'll answer the questions. But make sure you get your notebook and pen out. Okay. So we're going to start with planning. The three components that we're talking about today are planning, launching slash marketing, and then execution, what to do when you're there. So events, if I can give you a brief overview, events are a really great way to get people in the room so that they know you. And so if I can just give a brief overview of why they're important. A lot of people are like, I'm going to host events and like make money from them. And you certainly can, but that's a very different model and probably a less lucrative model than hosting events as lead generation for like potential clients, things like that. If you're at a point in your business where you're like, don't have to worry about lead generation or client generation or customer generation, that's when you really start hosting events that are like very high dollar, obviously huge ROI on those. But if you're kind of just starting out with events or you're early in your business, and even for me, if you're still in that stage, I would say events are more about lead generation. They're more of a marketing tool. They can make some money to make it worth it for your business, but you also have to be concerned about kind of what is the next step. And we'll talk about that at the end of the webinar or kind of through the webinar. Okay, cool. Planning. So the most important thing at all, completely, 100%, is your message. I had said earlier, I hosted an event in maybe like 6 months after I hosted my first Boss Lady Bash, and it was kind of a small group goal setting thing. And that one did okay. I think maybe like 8 people bought it, but it wasn't anywhere close to the 40 people that kind of kept selling at the Boss Lady Bash. And I think for me, I didn't really know how to do goal setting. It wasn't like a super great thing for me. I just knew that I loved to do it and I sort of wanted to facilitate it. So for me in that event, like the message was not there. It was not something that people really resonated with because it wasn't something that I really resonated with. The Boss Lady Bash, being in community with people in general, that really resonated with me. I really believed in it. There's a couple other events that I've launched or I'm working on launching that I also really believe in because I really believe that when in these circumstances, that whatever this event, the events that we'll host will change people's lives. And that is a marketing message and a marketing feeling that people can get and understand. And it is like this very strange thing where when people understand how passionate you are and how much you just believe that it's going to be the best thing ever, it will really, really help your clients and your customers and your event attendees want to be a part of it. If you're like hesitant, you're not sure it's valuable, you don't really know why it's important or how it'll change people's lives, it's really going to affect the way that you plan. It's going to affect the way that you market, and it's really going to affect the success of your event. So the most important thing before you start planning your event is why are you there? Oh, there we go. There's a slide. So why are you doing this? Why do you feel really super duper invested and involved? Like this is something that everybody needs to be doing. For me with the Boss Lady Bash originally, it was because I felt lonely and I knew other people felt lonely too. I knew there was no place where we could all go and feel like the stuff that we talked about was resonant. And I think it was really important for me to create that community. And I believed in it from the very beginning. I believed, obviously, I tested it out. I did a little beta test in my house and everybody loved it. And so that was what I needed. I spent $40 and a couple emails, and that was my test for me to make sure that this was worth it. And so that was my why. I wanted people to feel supported because I believe when you're supported, you can do anything. The next one, why do people want to come to this? So if you're like, I'm going to host a cooking class and we're going to do all like, I don't know, like casseroles, whatever. Is that something that people want to do? It might be. Or are you in the fitness community and people want to know how to do easy meal planning for Whole30 or something like that? So why would people want to come to this? Why would they want to spend their time and their money? What's the outcome that they're going to get at the end? Even if you don't have like a specific kind of idea about the outcome, you need to have some sort of like tangible thing that people can like take with them at the end. So for me, it was like, you get to go home with like 5 new friends, at least 5 new people that know about your business, 5 more people that know about you, rather than like one of those weird networking events where you like try to find one person that and then you just hang out with them the whole time. So figure out why people want to come to this. Ask people if they would want to come. Sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes people don't know what they want until they see it. So it's kind of up to you to it's half magic, half science. And then the last thing is what is unique about you or this event that creates scarcity? And so the one thing that events have is like they're not, it's not like a webinar where it can be like thousands of people on it. It's only, very small amount of people. So what is it about 40 spots or 10 spots or whatever it is that is unique, that people are like, oh man, I got to get me one of those. So things that the Boss Lady Bash, the unique part about the Boss Lady Bash is the language that I used. It was really fun. It was young. It was creative. It was beautifully put together, thanks to my wonderful graphic designer, because I'm not one. So that was unique in the marketplace. There wasn't another person in town that was like creating really beautiful space for female entrepreneurs. There were people that were doing female entrepreneurship support groups, but this was not like public. It was not marketed, or those groups were not public. They weren't marketed, or there were too many marketing messages for people to understand what the actual market needed and wanted. And this was like a very specific message. It was very much like, this is for creative business owners who want to meet new people, take their business to the next level. So that's what was unique about it. So find out what your message is, find out what's unique about it. Next, venue. You need a venue to host your event. And I'm going to talk about a couple tips. So think about the vibe that you want to create with your venue. A lot of times people are like, oh, I'm just going to host it at the library, which is totally fine, free, hey. But if you are trying to create intimacy, if you're trying to get people to know each other, if you're like, you have to think about the experience of someone walking into the door and what they're going to feel. And if you're not one of those people who understand, who doesn't understand what that means, you just think about when you walk into someone's home and like all the lights are off, and maybe it's like a little cold in there. Do you feel like super welcome? Are you super excited to be there? Do you feel like a little versus like if you walk into someone's home and like there's, delicious food cooking and it smells delicious, or there's a candle that smells delicious and it's warm and there's lights. So you just really got to think about the vibe. You have to think about that events are about experience, but it's not just about like what people learn. It's about the physical experience of them being in the space. So sometimes if you want people to learn and focus on content, that means, being more in a formal environment, and that's totally fine. But if you want to focus on intimacy or connection, that's a different environment, and you have to think about that with your venue. So think about non-traditional locations. So yoga studios, boutiques, co-working spaces, people's houses. I've hosted so many work events in my house, and people always think, oh man, that's creepy. You're gonna have people in your house, and people love it. It's like a side of me that people don't really get to see. So I really encourage you to work on that. Thinking about the vibe. There's lots of places that you can get for event spaces for free. Totally awesome. But also I would say work to create partnerships with the venues you host. So for me, at the beginning of Boss Lady Bash, I didn't pay for most of my venues because I really worked with connections that I had and then connections that I made. Like I would reach out to someone 6 months before I knew that I was hosting a bash and be like, hey, I'd love to come see your space, love to talk about it, blah, 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 blah. And then we would like maintain the relationship. I would send them business. I would recommend them. I'd shut them out on Instagram or social media. And then 6 months later, I'd make the ask and be like, hey, we should do an event together. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, great. So it's venue, you have to look at like getting free space, like partnerships. So with the Lark, I didn't actually have a partnership with them, but one of the tactics that I often use is I look at new venues. I look at businesses that are like either brand new or don't have a lot of traffic all the time. They really want to make a splash and they want that to get that momentum going in the local community. And so I am constantly, like one of the things that I constantly do, and that's part of my profession. But if you're thinking about hosting events, like you need to raise your radar to see like what are new businesses that are opening up, what are new things that people are posting about on social media, staying a little bit in the know so that you can approach those people and say, hey, I'd like to develop a relationship with you. I'd like to potentially host an event here. Lots of business owners will do that, especially retail space, because they want people in the space. So treat your venue hosting, if you're trying to host for free, as a partnership. Don't treat it as like give me this and, don't be afraid to ask. So, I now pay for all my events because my events or all my spaces because they make money. And I feel like unless it's like a brand new space and they want to do it as like a sponsor. But I now pay for almost all of my venues. But in the beginning, I didn't for probably the first 6 months, year. And then the third thing about the venue, create an atmosphere of intimacy. So like if you have 100 chairs set out and there are 20 people in the room, ask people to like move together. Like create a circle, like get people closer together. The thing about events is that they are personal, which I will talk about in a little bit here, but they're really super personal. And so you cannot be hosting and you cannot be teaching effectively when people are like literally have space between them. And you'll notice the great thing about events is you get immediate feedback, right? If people are on their phones, whatever, try to like really drill down on the expectations that you have as a host. And that means like I always say at the beginning of my events, put your phones away. You paid for this. You deserve to be here. You don't deserve to be checking your email. Like I always ask people to like make the commitment to being here. So make sure that you're creating this atmosphere of intimacy. So you're encouraging people to like be present and get value, because when people don't get value is when they're distracted and then they're like, oh, I didn't learn anything. But usually it's just because they're distracted. Okay, next, budget. So, budget's really important to have. You really need to have one so that you can know what you're doing, and also not so you don't spend a gajillion dollars, because events are super easy to spend money on. It's like really hard to budget for them. Fortunately, in the course, we talk all about budgeting, all about what like effective returns are, ways that you can make sure that you're getting return on your investment, and ways to quantify your returns. So if you have no budget to host your event, and like literally are like, I can't even spend like $1. I can't even like think about this. Consider partnering with other groups. So this is one way where people, there's a win-win. So like, let's say there's an existing group. Let's say there's like in my community, there's a chamber of commerce. There's like a business professional women's group. See if you can partner with them. Those guys need content, and other people, and you have content that you can give your expertise. And so it's a lot easier for you to not take on the expense of the event, but also still get the benefit of creating an experience for their audience. So if you're really hesitant to go forth and like really do this on your own, I would say, who can you partner with to make it to be able to deliver the content that you have, while also being able to help, or not having to do lots of promotion or planning or whatever. What I will say about that though is do one of those, but until you're hosting your own events, you don't get as much creative freedom and control. And it's also a co-branded experience. So if you're really trying to get out there to like book clients or tell people about your mission, it's a good way to do it. But it's definitely better to start, and it's a good way to start building your own community, but it's definitely better to like be the event host, because you have more creative freedom, you have more control, and people like attribute the event to you. Okay, cool. So next, if you sell tickets, plan for 75% of the sales to go toward event costs. I've definitely been able to get some of my clients' events down to 50% and sometimes even 25%, but those numbers are like mostly with retreats and also mostly with people who have been doing events for a while. So if you are like trying to make money from your events, just know that roughly industry standard, between 60 and 80% are going to go to ticket costs, sometimes 100%. You really sometimes have to get the feel for things. You'll forget things last minute, particularly with smaller events. For events are, not to go super deep into this, but events are like traditional like economies of scale, which means like if you are trying to, if you have 10 people in an event, but it can host 25, or let's say the venue can host 25, you're paying essentially each person's ticket. Like, let's say the venue costs $100 and each person that shows up paid, like 25 or something like that. If you have more people show up, obviously that venue cost per person goes down. And so you can split the cost among more people. But if you have fewer people, obviously the higher percentage of their ticket cost goes toward the venue. So yeah, so we talk about a lot about this in the course because I try to make sure that everyone understands that. It's a bit of a tricky concept, but if you are hosting your first event, plan to break even. I think I broke even on my first event, but like labor costs, I definitely lost money. If I was like hiring someone to do it for me, it definitely would not have made sense. So events are tricky. You got to really focus on the budget for them. And you've got to really stick to your budget and know like what's important and what's not super important. And we talk about that in the course. Okay, launching. I'm going to give you 3 quick tips about how to launch and execute the event. Launch and market. So number 1, get personal. Lots of people, the biggest complaint I get is people are like, I sent 3 emails to my list and nobody bought a ticket. Look, that is like there's so much stuff going on in people's world. Like you have to really make sure that that you understand and that they understand that events are about them. They're not about you, they're about them. And so in order for you to like really start garnering that, you have to like reach out to them personally. Maybe call them on the phone, maybe send them an email individually. The way I sold out, if you were on my email list, the way I sold out my first event was I individually emailed probably like 10 people and I said, hey, do you just mind sharing this even if you can't come? And most of those people shared it, and each, 10 people, there were 40 spots. If each of them referred one person, and that one person referred one person, like it was sold out pretty much. So one-on-one emails really, really work. Telling people that you think that they're a perfect fit and that you would really love to have them there, that is amazing. I mean, you got to get personal with this stuff. So, I would also say Facebook events can be, depending on your market, Facebook events can be really, really, they can be quite effective if you are circulating the event among a specific group of people. I don't always recommend Facebook events for paid events because sometimes people are like, I RSVP'd, and then they show up at the door and they're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to pay for it. So I would really highly recommend, you can do a Facebook event, but Facebook events are a really great way for people to share with other people. That definitely gets you more of the like broader reach, and it's better than sometimes better than email, sometimes better than Facebook because, or Facebook ads or any sort of advertising, because it's from a trusted source. Like my friend promotes my event and she says, this event's really fun. I'm really excited to go. Who's with me? That is more convincing than like someone else, someone that you don't have a relationship, saying I'm going to this event. So make sharing your invitation really easy by targeting the right people. So what that means is make sure that if someone's like, oh, I can't go, don't just say, okay, yeah, bummer. Say, okay, great. Would you mind like posting about it? Maybe on Facebook, would you just mind maybe like inviting one person? So just make sure that when you're trying to get people to share your invitation, it's super simple. Like they have the link immediately, or they have the, I always do a little graphic in Canva. And then I do like a little, like, here's what you should post on Facebook or post on Instagram. And I give that to them. And that way it's really super easy and they can do it themselves. So make this personal and make this really easy for the people that you're trying to help recruit to help you share. Get brave. So this is where a lot of events fail, is that people give up after a couple, or they get busy, or they're like, I'm planning my event for 6 weeks, so I'm just going to send a couple emails and call it good. I feel that, because when I sell out an event, I'm like, great, I don't have to market it anymore, which is not true, because I should be marketing that it's sold out and getting people on the wait list for the next one and all that fun stuff. But I'm not as great at that. But so be brave. Be prepared to consistently ask people to come. You need to be asking people to come. If you're it's exhausting and it's hard, but you have to be prepared to like continue asking people. Even though it feels like a broken record to you, it's not a broken record to them because they haven't heard of it yet. You're not bothering people. Everyone's like, oh, I'm always afraid to bother people. You're not bothering people. They forget, life gets busy. They deleted the email. They lost it. They're, whatever. accidentally archived it, you're not bothering them. Please follow up. Don't think that like one email and then, whatever, and then we're done. And don't be afraid to experiment. Like you got to try stuff in your marketing. So some of the things that I've tried are physical flyers. I printed out a bunch of physical flyers and hung them all around town. I don't know if anyone bought from that, but I tried it. I tried a contest once, which I don't know if didn't go super well, but I tried like a challenge, maybe like a 5-day challenge on Instagram to help people promote. I like tried all kinds of things. So don't be afraid to experiment. Like everything's an experiment when you're running a business. So some of the marketing tools are like things that I just found online. We cover some of them in the course, ones that work really, really well, but that's not to say that other tools won't work really, really well for you. And the most important thing, number 3, is to get busy. Like persistence is key. Like you just keep going. And then, like I said, follow up, and then figure out the best medium that you love to work with. For me, it was email. I loved one-on-one email. That was really good for me and that worked super well. And it works for a lot of my clients. But figure out the best medium that works for you and continue to follow up with people. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, Facebook ads and blah, blah, but you're not filling 1,000 spots. You're filling 30 or 50, So like, you don't need to do lots of mass promotion or mass advertising. So unless you are filling 1,000, and then we have strategies for that too. Okay. How to create a rave-worthy experience. What do you do when you get on site? And how do you make it really amazing so that people feel like they go home and they're like, this is awesome. Like, I love this. So number 1, greet everyone at the door. Like, make sure you're there. Make sure you are physically present. Make sure your face is available. Make sure that people know that you're the host. Lots of times people come to an event and like they'll meet me and they'll be like, oh, how are you related? And I was like, oh, I host this. This is my thing. And so then, as the host, people are super usually excited to talk to you. So leverage that. Make sure that you're focusing on garnering your attendees' emotions. Make sure you're taking care of them. And that starts with meeting people at the door. So remember, it's about the attendees. It's not about the people that didn't show up. And I always say that because a lot of people are like, oh, there's only going to be 6 people in the room. What do I do? And I'm like, it is about those 6 people. Like those 6 people can be extremely powerful for you. And make sure that when you're there, you're there. You're not worried about the people that didn't show up, the people that canceled, the people that didn't buy a ticket. You are concerned about the people in the room. Pretend you're hosting everyone in your house. So like I said, analogy before, if you were hosting in your house and you're like, in the bedroom taking a shower when people are arriving, like how are people going to feel about that? So make sure that you are there, you're greeting people, you are welcoming them in, you're asking them to, make sure that either you're taking their coat or that they have a place to put their coat. Just imagine like you're hosting them in your house. It's the same exact thing. It also helps. It really, really helps to have someone volunteer with you. This is one of those things that like, I did this the first time and somebody like checked everyone else in and made sure they got their name tags so that I could like talk to people and introduce them to other people. Life-changing. So important. So make sure you have someone that can volunteer to help you to just kind of help with some of that front end logistical stuff. So that you can do more of the hosting piece, welcoming people, greeting, all that fun stuff. But the 3 times that you really need to, or the 2 times, I guess, is the minute that people walk in the door. That is like a huge impression on people. It usually like makes or breaks the rest of their experience. And then the end, what they leave with, how you've made an impression on them. So I really try to make sure that people don't leave early. I really try to make sure that everyone stays until like the event's over. I try not to go over on time because the end experience is also really important for people because that's what they'll take home with them. That's what they'll think about when they're leaving. Okay, number 2, have an organized way for them to interact. So again, this is about them, not about you. A lot of times people will like stand up and they'll be like, I'm going to talk and talk and talk and talk and give you all my knowledge, which is sort of like the webinar format, which is how I feel right now. But in-person events it's about them. It's not about you. So most people want to feel connected. And so if you can make sure that they can feel connected to you, awesome. But an easier way to do it is make sure they feel connected to each other. That's a little bit easier. You don't have to do so much work when they feel connected to each other. So what activities can you create to get people talking? Is that when they walk in, they get like an icebreaker that they have to kind of run through? Do they Do they talk to their, the person sitting next to them? Are they put into a small group? So for me, I always use small group discussion, which is a huge hit. You never go to an event and you're like prepared into a group. That is like a next level of organization that people really love. And lots of people like fight me back on this. But I found that it works really, really well for introverts too, who are afraid to kind of like make the first step and talk to people. I find that those people, introverts usually prefer, and extroverts too, to have the hard work of meeting someone done for them. And so there's lots of ways you can do that. One for me is to pre-match people into small groups. There's tons of other ways that we talk about in the course, but that's definitely one of them. And that can be super successful. So find your own like quote unquote small group discussion. How can you get people over the hurdle of going to a place that might be unfamiliar, where they don't know anyone and they don't know you? Okay. And at the end, the most important thing, keep your call to action short, but clear and effortless. Okay. So what happens when they are there, in terms of your call to action? Do you want them to sign up? Do you want them to, um, you know, part of this, keeping your call to action short but clear and effortless is about making sure that people aren't overwhelmed with things to do. Meaning, like, don't give them like 3 action items to take home or like 3 things to do the minute they walk in the door. Like, make sure that like the minute they walk in the door, it's like, let me take your coat. Here's where you walk. Very clear. Like, people usually can't take more than 2 directions. So a lot of times at events, I'll have people be like, oh yeah, and this is all the things that we're going to tell them. And I was like, no, we literally just have to get them to the next point. Like, step 1, walk in the door. Step 2, go to the next place. So you can't give people too much direction or they'll get confused. So what happens what do you want them to do when they're there? For me, I usually want them to connect with people in their group. And so usually that means like, here's a prompt that you can execute. The other thing that I really want them to do is sign up for my email list. Like, that's like the most times at events, if I don't think they're a good candidate to work with me, I still want them on my email list because they might be in the future. So what happens when they're there? How can you make sure that when they leave the event, they feel like they got so much value and you really delivered on what you provided? So make sure that you're thinking about, what do I want people to do when they go home? Do I want them to take action? Do I want them to call me, set up a call with me? What do I want them to do? So just make sure that when people are going home and they're leaving your event, they have one specific targeted action that they need to do. Maybe it's personal work, or maybe it's work to reach out to you or reach out to someone else. So just make sure that those are kind of like 2 things that you get really clear on. What do they do when they're there? What do they do when they go home? I don't like to let people leave without committing to me somehow, meaning committing to like take action on something, or committing to work with me in the future, committing to be on my email list, committing to something. Nobody gets to walk out of the room unless they've commit to something. The easiest way to do that is get them on an email list, have them follow you on social media, something like that. But make sure that every person that walks in the room commits to something with you so that you can retain them as either client currently or a potential client in the future. That's where a lot of businesses fail, is they don't like think about what happens after people go home. Okay, so I'm gonna sneeze. I have a sneezy here in a second. Okay, it didn't come through. So to recap, the 3 things that are most important that you should be doing or the 3 things that I want you to take home today, because I want to be clear and effortless. Events don't have to be complicated. They can be very simple. You can get a free venue. You can, do a very small, you can make it open to 10 people. So make it a very small launch. They don't, and it can cost you $40 or like a potluck style where everyone brings something and you kind of host and talk about whatever you want to host and talk about. They can be really easy. Events are personal. So you have to take a very personalized approach to them and you'll be successful. So make sure that you're focusing on the personal piece of it. And then also, events are great conversion tools because I didn't get into this too much in the last slide, but they're really, really good at, again, when you greet people in the door, when you make sure that they have a great call to action, when they don't feel confused by the 1,200 action items that you're giving them, they can be an amazing experience. And that's something that you can't get from a book, or you can't get from I mean, you can sometimes get it from a book, but you can't get it from other forms of marketing like emails or whatever. So events are a way for people to get to know you, for them to like move up the engagement ladder from zero, they don't know about you, to yes, they do know about you, to now they're spending time with you, and then eventually, giving you money somehow. So they're really, really great at converting people who are maybe on the fence about something, or may want to work with you in a different way, or but feel like they don't have the time or the money. They're a really great way to like step up to that next level, help people get step up to the next level, and then hopefully they'll work with you in the future, or they'll buy from you in the future. So those are the three things that you need to know about events. So I did want to quickly mention, all of this stuff is kind of a basic overview of everything that we talk about in the Events That Convert course, which is open for enrollment for only about, let's see, 5 more hours. We have some amazing students in there. I'm so excited. And I'm really, really excited to get started on Monday. The content is coming together so well. I've been having so much fun making it. And I I have my outline, which has a ton of stuff. And then I keep being like, oh, I need to add this. Oh, I need to add this. There's so much good stuff in there. It's 7 weeks, 7 course modules. There's 20 plus checklists, email templates, planning documents, things that you can take and like either print and put in a binder if you're a binder person, or that you can just fill out on your own time, or replicate however you want to do them. We do 2 guest expert Q&As. I should also mention we have 4 live Q&A calls. And then we have a private support community, which is going to be amazing. I can already tell. Which is in Facebook. So if you're not on Facebook, you don't have to be on Facebook, but we would love for you to be on Facebook and to be a part of the group. So if you enroll in the next 15 minutes, so right around the end time of this webinar, you also get a one-on-one 30-minute call with me at any point during the live course, so I can provide feedback on your event. And that's only for people who are attending the webinar, who haven't bought the course yet at the early bird price, and who are, wanting a little bit of extra support, which I'm really excited about. My one-on-one courses, or my one-on-one calls for an hour, are $300. So this is half an hour. It's a value of $150. And so if you are getting in at the $699 price, which it is right now, the one-on-one call will essentially provide you that much more value. I have a really good reputation for, and people have told me, like, I have a great reputation for kind of like cutting through the crap of what you're trying to do and helping you figure out like what you can actually do. And also validating like some of your ideas if you have really great ideas. And I've been told that I'm really good at validating them. And if your ideas aren't great, I have been told that I'm good at kind of sussing out what's great about them and what needs to be ditched. So if you enroll in the next 50 minutes, you can have one of those, which I'm super excited about. Excited to offer and get to know some people a little bit more in depth, one-on-one. So today, if you want, join now. $699 is our price. Just one, you save $90 if you do it that way, or you can do the payment plan, which is $197 for payments. We'll bill you every like whenever you enroll. It's just monthly after that. So you don't have to do anything. We just bill you. It's super, super easy, super fast, super quick. Yeah. I did want to reiterate this event I've been getting a lot of questions like, when are you opening it again? Can I buy it after? I don't know when I'm opening it again. I have a big year this year. This was kind of the only time that I had planned on opening it. I'm thinking about opening it in the fall, but it'll definitely be, the price will definitely go up just based on the feedback that we're going to get from this round of students. So, I wanted to answer some questions. Does anyone have questions about anything? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to my beautiful face. I know you're super all excited about that. And then I want to check in the chat to see if anyone has questions. So if you have questions, please check it in the chat, or please go to the chat, type question. It can be about events. It can be about the course. It can be about what I'm doing today. It can be about anything. So I'm really excited and looking forward to hearing from you. If I can ever find my chat. There it is. Found the chat. Okay, so questions. Some questions that I have been getting are, let me just pull them up really quick. Let me just. Okay. These questions are loading very, very slowly. Um, okay. It's like because I'm live streaming, everything's like going so slow, and I'm just opening up the questions. Okay. So, one of the questions I've gotten, how do you find a venue for free or for cheap if you don't know anyone? So I love this question because most of the time when people are like, I don't have a network, I don't know anyone, I'm really like starting from scratch, I don't know what to do. Uh, Figure out who you know. Like, you know someone, you have a home or an apartment, maybe you have real estate, like, you know someone. And so a lot of times I think it's really easy to be like, oh, everyone else knows people and I don't know people. Well, I think probably just take a week or a couple days and think about your interactions. If you go to church or if you go to, the library, or if you go to shops and boutiques and things like that, and you're kind of a frequent customer of places, like, where do you go and who do you know? A lot of times for me, I surround myself with business owners. So I do have, I do really try to connect a lot with business owners. And that leads to like easier connections about like, oh, I know the person that owns this place, or I know the person that owns this place. So just consider a coffee shop, consider a bar or a restaurant that's always empty, that you never see anyone in there. See if they would agree to host you. Get out of your house and onto the street, like Google free event space, Google co-working spaces, all that fun stuff. So yeah, just make sure that you're thinking about places that you um, could potentially be hosting. Just always be on the lookout, I would say. I'm constantly on the lookout for event venues and things like that. So yeah, so just be on the lookout, kind of keep your eyes open, and do a lot of Googling and meet a lot of people. Like I said in the webinar, like, you got to be a little bit brave with some of this stuff. Sometimes I don't think you can host an event without being able to ask people things. And so one of the muscles that you might have to strengthen if you participate in the course is your asking muscle. And if you feel uncomfortable asking people for things and feel uncomfortable with a potential no, um, then that's something that we can work on. But that's really, really crucial to having success, is just being able to ask and being okay if they say no, because we all get no's, and no's are part of the process. And the more you hear a no, the easier it gets to hear a no. Okay, other questions. When I did get a question this morning, what, hang on, let me just scroll into it. When is the best time to host an event? So it depends on your audience. It's really funny because a lot of people are like, why don't you host events during the day or at lunchtime or in the morning or breakfast and things like that? And that's just, I'm in a community of business owners or people who are trying to start businesses, and they can't always like get out for lunch, and they don't always, they don't always have time in the morning. I find that the most, and again, my audience, not a lot of them have kids, so I don't have to compete with as much after work stuff. Plus, it's like, if you do after work, or you don't have to like compete with pickup at school. So I know sometimes that can be, evening events can be really hard, but I've just been finding that that's the most successful for me. If you work with people who, like, I don't know, you live in a suburb and everybody commutes to a big city, maybe the weekends are the best time for you. Maybe a Saturday is really good because people have like long commutes, and they're not like trying to go to something, at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday because they just drove an hour and a half from wherever they're driving to. So consider your audience, consider who they are, and also know that changes. Like, as I've been growing older a little bit, like now I have people who are married, people in my community who are married and have kids and things like that. And so I'm considering, like, what are some other things what other times of the day should I be hosting events? If you're thinking about what time of the year should you host events, is again an audience question. I try not to host events really close to like Labor Day because that's usually back to school, and also people are like usually burnt out by the summer. I try not to host events super early in September because again, people are really focused on other things. Try not to host events close to the holidays unless it's like a holiday themed party. I try not to host events in January, although some people like to do that just because it's post holiday and people don't have a bunch of money. Um, Conferences can be really successful in January because people are like, it's holidays and I have nothing to look forward to. It also can be a little bit challenging to host events in the winter if people are traveling because of like snowstorms and things like that. So it just really depends. And if you're in the course with me, then I can advise you better based on what you're thinking and who your audience is. But or the community can help advise you as well. But it's definitely like an it depends scenario, and you got to think about like, when are you the busiest? And is that when your audience is also going to be busy? So if anyone else has any other questions, let me know in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. You're also welcome to email me at support at laurencasali.com. I'll answer all your questions there. But you have 10 minutes. I'm going to end the webinar now. But if you buy in the next 10 minutes, you get those freebies, the one-on-one 30-minute one-on-one calls. And I'm really, really excited to see you all in the course. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait to start on Monday. So see you then. Happy Thursday and have a great week and weekend. Bye, y'all.